Thank you for tuning in to the Fridays from the Farm from the Fox and Crow Farm in New Hampshire, our podcast series for the month of March, Women in Farming. I'm so excited to bring this amazing topic to the forefront of our March podcast series. I have the privilege of knowing so many women in the farming industry. These are not your typical women, and they're not your typical farmers either. These are bust your ass, full-time working wives, moms, career executives, and dedicated land stewards and animal lovers. We dig in deep about their lifestyle, marriage and relationships, family life, their careers beyond the farm, and their farm and farm business. How did they start? Where do they want to go? And how will they get there? We will share stories of success and failure and talk about the emotional impact farming has had on their bodies, mind, and soul. Join us for this motivating and inspiring journey with some of the toughest women in New Hampshire from our Fridays from the Farm March series, Women in Farming from New Hampshire. So I want to thank everybody for joining us on the Fridays on the Farm podcast from the Fox and Crow Farm in Barnstead, New Hampshire. Today, we are going to be talking with Nikki Seavey with Blueberry Ridge Ranch out of Pittsfield, New Hampshire. She's joining us as a part of this podcast series on women in farming. So thank you so much, Nikki, for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to share.
Yeah, well, we definitely have a lot of information we want to cover. The topic was really an important topic for a lot of women, not just in the state of New Hampshire, but across this entire country. They are working 9 to 5, they're corporate executives, they're really struggling to find the time and the balance between their careers and pursuing a dream. And so I really thought you were the perfect person to talk about this because you encompass everything that I think the average American woman desires. You're very inspiring. You are an extremely hard worker. So I'm really hoping that, whatever you can convey in this podcast is something that other women are really going to enjoy listening to.
Awesome.
So kind of going into this, I really want to talk about your life before your farm. Tell everybody, where were you? What were you doing?
So, my husband and I have always had dreams of being more self-sufficient and owning a farm. And when I was a younger kid, my parents moved to a larger property and they got beef cattle and they got pigs and they did chickens. And at the time, being a 16, 17-year-old teenager, I didn't really necessarily appreciate that as much, but I always really was interested in what they were doing and why they decided to do that, which is, of course, to have some self-sustainability and to be able to just know where your food is coming from. And so as I grew, life changed. I had a family. I met my husband, Matt, and that desire and dream to just be self-sufficient never really left me. And I started to talk with my husband a lot about that. And as he started to become more aware and, wanting those same dreams and desires that I had, we would drive around and look at farm properties and say, oh my gosh, imagine if we could do this one day. Imagine if we could do that one day. And both of us just worked really hard. I've always been a type A personality where if there's something that I set my sights on, I just work and make it happen. And farming was definitely one of those things. And we were able to finally purchase our property about 4 years ago. Again, just working really hard and making it happen. I am a real estate agent now, but I had a long background in network marketing sales. So just kind of putting myself out there in trial by fire and reaching for those goals and never letting up on that is really how we did it.
Yeah. That there's so much about what you just said and setting these goals and accomplishing them. And I want to talk about that more, but you say self-sustain. What does that look like to you? What was that farm before your farm? What did it look like?
So the farm physically itself?
Yeah. What is self-sustain farm?
So to me, self-sustaining really just means having a better understanding of where your food is coming from and really just feeling like, if the bottom fell out, that everything would be okay because you have a plan B.
Yeah.
And that's what it really means to me. And just knowing that, we don't necessarily have all the skills to do all that, but we're willing to learn, we're willing to be adaptable and to gain knowledge from others and implement in our own life. And that's really just what we've been doing. When we started with our farm, we came from our property that was just in, you know, a neighborhood type setting, and we had 2 little goats there and some chickens for eggs. And then when we moved to our property, where we're at now, we just started adding more chickens and kind of dabbling a little more in some of the larger livestock. And then this past year when COVID hit, we were like, holy cow, you know, now's the time for us to really kind of like dive into this thing and let's do it.
Yeah.
And so we picked up a couple of pigs and raised those out, and that was a lot of fun for us and a huge learning experience, and sometimes a test to our marriage too. But you know, overall, just so much fun. And now we have 4 beef cattle that we're loving, and we're making plans for the future of how can we help provide others in a small scale, not necessarily so much of a retail setting, but how can we help some of our friends and family members to either enjoy some of our own products or to even do some of this themselves.
Yeah. Do you envision your farm being your primary source of income at some point, or is this always going to remain kind of real estate first and then farm second?
You know, I struggle with that because I would love to just be home and to be with the animals and be farming every day. But that's, I think, where my like roadblock mentally is I don't know how to bridge the two and make it a full-time sustainable income. So for us right now, it's very much just a hobby thing, but it would be amazing if it wasn't.
Yeah. So going into another question for you, would you say that it was the real estate aspect of purchasing the home that was the catalyst to the farm that you have now? I mean, what was that progression? How did you guys go from Auburn, New Hampshire, and what were you doing at the time? Were you were a dental hygienist, right?
Yeah, so I went to college to be in the dental field. I was a dental assistant and I did that for many, many years. And then I started a network marketing company. And that's how I really started to gain the financial independence to have these kind of pipe dreams turn into reality. But the farm didn't start until we acquired our property. You know, but that's not to say that if you're utilizing a small property, I mean, we had chickens and our 2 little goats on, you know, under 2 acres. And that was fun. That was a fun thing for us. So I don't want people to misconstrue and think that they have to have a large acreage to be able to do this sort of a thing. Anybody I think can do this at any scale. But for us, knowing that we eventually wanted to have the pigs, the cows, we needed that large acreage. So yeah, definitely gaining that was huge for us.
Yeah. The name of the farm, Blueberry Ridge Ranch. Tell us about that. What does it mean?
So we came up with that name because we're very fortunate to have about 4 acres of blueberry bushes on our property. The previous owners before we purchased were arborists, and they would plant all of these amazing trees. And the husband actually worked at a nursery, and he would take home the trees and that were too damaged to be sold at the store, and he would plunk them in the ground. And if they took, then great. And if they didn't, then that was okay too. But we ended up with all of this acreage of blueberry bushes, and they're all along the ridge of the property. And our house sits way up on top of the hill. So it kind of just seemed like a nice little fit there for us.
Yeah. And for people that are listening or watching this through our YouTube channel, feel free to check them out. Blueberry Ridge Ranch on Facebook and social media, as well as Instagram. I think it's their Instagram handle is Nikki.
Yeah.
Blueberry.
_ Yeah.
Yeah. And you can see pictures of what their property looks like and how they set it up. And I do appreciate you bringing up the fact that you don't have to have a large amount of acreage. I hope that really resonates with a lot of people that are listening. You may already have something that you can turn into something. And like you were doing too, you can still be working your full-time job, but invest in those things that you really enjoy. So
Yeah. And I think too, like at part of it, just going back to not having a large acreage is now that we do have this, you know, at the time when we were just operating on like 2 acres and really just in a neighborhood setting, we used to be the people would walk their dogs and our goats would be outside running around like little labs. And people were like, oh, you're the goat people, you know? So that was always kind of funny. But now that I think back at it, I'm like, yeah, we probably could have done quite a bit more there. We just didn't understand or know yet. So yeah, definitely don't be discouraged if you don't have a big piece of land.
Yeah. So let's talk about the fact that you're a wife, you're a mom, you're a full-time real estate agent. I know there's a lot of people that ask you this question already. I know I get asked, how do you find the time? Let's really talk about this work-life balance and your marriage and your family. Like, how do you find this balance?
So the thing of it is you just have to work it into the nooks and crannies of your day. Okay. So we all have 24 hours in a day, right? And so for me, there are certain things that I know that have to get done every single day. And um, I really, when I wake up in the morning, I used to be a big list maker, but I kind of just, I've just internalized it all. And when you have animals, it's, you just know, there's a time clock that like you're out there at the barn. Usually we feed usually around 6 o'clock in the morning. Takes about a half hour to do our chores, our animals in the morning, and we're out. So it's like, okay, so I get up in the morning having my cup of coffee. Sometimes I do a little bit of work, for 15-20 minutes, check a quick email, go outside, take care of the animals, come back in, and get my day started. Our son is a little older, so I'm not dealing with super small ones, but a couple of years ago when Brian was younger, then I would have more responsibilities with getting him ready for school and whatnot. But again, I'm a big proponent of, if there's something that you want to do, you're going to find a way to make it happen, right? So maybe that means getting up a little bit earlier to do your work, or staying up a little later to do extra work for income so that you can make this dream a reality, and really just working it into the nooks and crannies of your day. Um, it's not easy, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
It's worth it. The sacrifices.
Do you find that you have like a 50-50 balance with your husband, or is this kind of you have your part, he has his part? How does that work?
So Matt is very involved in the animals. I'm very lucky for that. He's the guy that sometimes I'll go out there to do them and he's like, they're already done. So I'm like very, very fortunate with that. But he really, really loves the animals, especially the cows. They're like his babies. And which is
Uh-oh.
great. I mean, it's great. He's really good with them. And so I would definitely say, as far as that, it's a 50-50. There are things that fall by the wayside, like housework and like other stuff that has to get done and you don't necessarily want to do it. But I feel like we do a pretty good job prioritizing. And every once in a while we have to have discussions and we reset the focus, and things move along from there. But sometimes with work it does get a little tricky. I'm a very busy real estate agent, and mostly what I do is at night and on the weekends.
Mhm.
So that can get a little tricky because I have the personality where I'll just work 24/7 if I could, and that's not always the best thing. But I do feel like the farm helps me with that a lot, because it keeps me balanced and it gives me an opportunity to leave the phone and leave the computer. Everything stays in the house and I go outside and I just get to be with the animals and really just decompressing.
Yeah.
So,
So one last question before we take a quick break. So going back on the topic of the work life balance, because I know this is a big topic for a lot of people. You have the career, you have the animals. At any point, have you gotten to a point where maybe it's too much, it's not
mhm.
enough? How do you know that you're not doing too much, that you're not putting too much pressure on you or your family?
It's always an adjustment. It's literally adjusting the sails, sometimes day to day,
Mm,
because we never know what's going to come up, as far as, especially if you're self-employed and you're trying to run your own career business and then trying to work the farm at the same time. It's a constant readjustment. And like one thing that I find is really important is just always having an open communication, not only with your spouse and with your kids too.
yeah.
Because sometimes, sometimes you just need to take a step back and be like, okay, this is about our goals in the family. And for me, like working a lot does sometimes cast a shadow on the other things that are more important for us. But at the same time, um, I think that I think that I know my husband understands that when I'm a hard worker and like really just kind of out there hustling, it's because we have a collective goal and dream together that we're working towards and that we have worked towards. And, one thing too, that I think as women, we have a hard time appreciating, like we're always wanting more rather than just appreciating the steps and like how far we've already come. So for myself personally, I try to like center myself, and every once in a while, like I have to call a friend, I'll call Erin or I'll call somebody else, and they're like, just take a step back and look at what you've done. Like it doesn't always have to be at 1,000 miles an hour. And I mean, that for me, that's my personal biggest struggle, biggest struggle. Sure.
I think that's why social media is so great. Like maybe you should just stop and go back to your Blueberry Ridge Facebook account and look at the pictures.
Yeah.
When you bought
seriously.
the property to where you are now.
Yeah. Like enjoy the journey a little bit. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's so wonderful about the animals too, is because they're just like their day is just being, right? And like when you're out there spending time with them and they're happy to see you, it grounds you and it kind of brings you back to like what's really important. They don't care about your phone or your car or like what you're wearing and all that sort of stuff. And it's humbling. It's cool.
Yeah.
And that's what I really like about them too.
Yeah. Well, we're going to stop for a quick break, but we will be bringing Nikki Seavey back on, and we'll get a chance to take a look at the website and the social media accounts as well. So thank you guys. We're back from our break. We're here with Nikki Seavey with Blueberry Ridge Ranch out of Pittsfield, New Hampshire. We had a great first session talking about the whole balance and everything else. So Nikki, I really appreciate you being here with us.
Awesome.
We ended our first session on kind of a controversial topic for a lot of people. You described these farm animals. They sound adorable. They sound cute. How do you butcher them?
Yeah. So here's the thing. So going back to, being a teenager child and having my dad take in animals, so with cows, pigs, and chickens, really helped me to get an understanding about, first off, I eat meat. So like I would prefer to know where the animal is coming from. I would prefer to know what type of a life it has lived, what it's being fed. And I understand that it's a difficult thing. And yes, I care very much about the animals. And I think that is important, as a homesteader and as someone that is going to get into this type of thing is to have compassion for the animal. I have compassion for the animal. I love them. I appreciate them for who they are, but I also recognize that this is what their purpose is in the end. So it's tough. I mean, I don't enjoy that day, when we need to load them up and bring them. I don't like it. But at the same time, I also know that we're providing for our family in a way that is as healthy as I possibly can make it for them.
Yeah. And you mentioned your family, but your production is now grown to a level where you can supply some of this meat and product to the community, right? So, what's the plan as far as how far are you going to take this? When do you know that you've succeeded? What are your future goals? What does that look like?
So our goals right now are to have different pieces of the farm financially support other pieces of the farm. Okay. So that kind of goes back to being like sustainable, right? So last year we started with just having 2 pigs, and that was for us. And that was wonderful. It was a great toe in the water to try it out. My husband has zero experience with this sort of thing. But he's very he's just all about it. This is really exciting for him too. So we got the pigs and we had a great experience with them. What we've done with our pigs is we pasture raise them. So, every couple of days we pick up their fencing and we do that electric fencing netting with the solar charger, and we pick them up and we move them around. So they're eating all this awesome vegetation that nobody else wants to eat. The pigs are all about it and they're happy. Right. And so we started with those 2. And then this year we may have bitten off a little more than we can chew.
I no comment.
but we have 8. Okay. So 2 has now become 8. Um, but what,
Only 8?
yeah, just 8. So it's okay.
It's okay.
It's
It's
okay.
okay, guys.
It's okay. So our plan with these hogs is, so 6 of them are actually already sold in halves. Okay. So we have 12 families that are going to be each purchasing a half a pig. Okay. And they're totally jazzed about it because these are people that are excited to have a animal that has been very well taken care of. They know where the meat's coming. I'm like, you can come visit, bring your kids, and at the end of the day, we're able to provide them a quality product and they're able to feel good about knowing what they're feeding their family too.
Yeah.
So, and then the other 2 will be for us. So that's our plan this year. And going back to talking about how we're hopeful that part of the farm will pay for the other pieces of the farm. So the income that we're getting in from the pigs is already spent. So that money is going to be allocated for all of the round bales that we'll need for the cows for next winter. So 2021, 2022. So that's how we're trying to operate our business, is to basically have it pay for itself.
Yeah. Smart. And for those of you that are watching this podcast on our YouTube channel, you'll see the website here in the background. So blueberryridgeranchnh.com. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what we're looking at here?
So this is a very basic website that I just threw up, and we're going to be adding to it, as spring and summer is approaching and there's more content to add. So last year, again, going back to COVID, this was our first year. 2020 was like, okay, we're going to do this thing and we're going to throw ourselves in and make it happen. And we did a pretty big vegetable garden last year. And I had a section of that garden that was just all flowers, for cut flowers. So this year I'm really going to be expanding the cut flower section. Again, we just talked about the pigs. And then we've also started a super cool little like niche type business on the farm where we're growing microgreens. And I, up until about a month ago, had no idea what microgreens are, but they're kind of a specialized product. Basically, microgreens, we're growing them hydroponically. They are a plant that is the stage between a sprout and the actual plant. Okay. So you harvest them at about between 7 to 12 days, depending on what type of plant it is. And these plants are served in various types of dishes in restaurants. You can throw them into smoothies. They're highly nutritious. So they carry, for broccoli, for instance, it carries 40% of the nutrients in this actually little microgreen plant than it does in the actual broccoli fruit.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a superfood. And
Yeah.
we've really enjoyed growing that. So we're just getting through our first grow now. On our Instagram, I've been updating, and then I've been reaching out to some local restaurants, and they have interest in sampling our products. So now that we've kind of like done some trial and error and figure out what works, we're going to be planting our second grow and sampling out to these restaurants. So that's going to be a really fun thing. Yeah, we're excited.
This is appealing to me just for the fact that we don't have to deal with the weeds outside and pests and everything else. These are grown in a completely contained environment, right?
Correct. Yeah. So my husband and I have made a climate controlled room, a grow room, and these greens are grown vertically. So basically what you do is we grow them in an organic matter called coconut coir, which is ground up coconut husks. And you place them into a tray and you put the seeds on top. And then you do a series of basically placing weights on top of the trays with the material and the seeds in it for a few days. And then actually taking the weight off and placing a blackout cover on top to have them germinate. And then once they reach a certain height, then you stick them under the lights.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, and then we bottom water them as well. So it's a series of 2 trays. You're dumping water in the tray that's underneath so that it's growing hydroponically.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Okay. Well, then this brings up a whole nother question for me, for you. Okay. So you have the animals outside and then you have this on the inside. Like, when do you know, okay, maybe the microgreens is like a really cool niche And this is the area that you need to be growing and expanding, and maybe the stuff outside isn't as critical as like where how do you
Okay.
know?
I don't know. We're in a conundrum because
I mean,
no, we don't know. Okay. So again, like going back to my intense personality, I'm like, let's do 1,000 things. Okay.
but they all sound so great and they all sound so important, but I could picture your barn, all of a sudden the barn just becomes like a huge microgreen.
Microgreenland. I
Yeah.
know. I know. Honestly, like the opportunity with the microgreens for us, it's almost overwhelming because it's endless.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of how I feel about it. And I'm almost like, oh my God, like really no one knows about this. It's something that is very European. It's something that is like they're doing in the big cities and hasn't really moved here yet. But the thing I love so much about New Hampshire is there really are those types of restaurants that would be all about this sort of thing. And I think
Yeah.
people are really starting to become more in tune about what they're eating and what they're putting in their bodies. And so I don't know. I mean, it may come to a point where we scale back a lot on the animals and just do just for us, which is fine. I mean, I don't think we'll ever stop having our own beef and pork just for us.
Yeah.
But maybe the microgreens really take off and like I don't do flowers or anything like that. I
Yeah.
could see that happening. I really could.
How do you even get into the microgreens? There must have been a big investment cost as far as the setup and the materials. Did you read about it? Did you find it on YouTube?
YouTube.
Where
I
did these
found it
come
on
from?
YouTube. Yeah. So again, I really just trying to find different ways on how the farm can pay for the farm. Okay. So my husband and I were very big YouTubers, like watching people all the time. And there's quite a few different farmers and homesteaders that we like to follow. And so this microgreens thing popped up in one of the videos that you should watch. And I was like, I was actually home by myself one day watching this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this girl, what is she?
Impulsively on Amazon. Getting, ordering.
I was like, oh my God, Matt comes home from work and I'm like, guess what we're doing? It's basically how it went. And he was like, I don't even know what that is. Well, yeah. So investment wise, it really wasn't that much to get into it because it's so scalable, right? So right now we're just starting and like figuring out what we want to grow first off, and then how many trays we want to grow and whatnot. So it's very scalable. So right now we have just 4 large racks. And, we have bought all of the trays for this. There's a company out there called Bootstrap Farmer that specializes in these microgreen trays. So we purchased some trays through them. We figure with the rack setup that we have right now, we can do up to 96 trays a week, which
Wow.
is a lot. Yeah. So retail wise, each tray of product, on average, each tray will sell anywhere between $25 to $30 of product. So what you do after you harvest is you place it into a container and it sells by weight. So
are you cutting it? Are you cutting the top vegetation and that's what you're distributing?
Yeah. So what you do is you actually they make knives. You don't trim with scissors because it actually pinches the plant and it can cause it to die sooner. These microgreens will last for up to 2 weeks in your fridge, which is crazy. So you just take a very sharp blade, and you just literally slice the green right above the coconut core. So it doesn't pull any roots.
Yeah. And you could probably recycle that coconut core, right?
Some of them, with some of the varieties you can, like broccoli will regrow, beans, peas will regrow. But most of it's trash. So our plan with that is to feed it to the hogs and the chickens.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have to just do a whole episode on the New Hampshire microgreens.
Yeah.
I'm excited to follow this journey. And I think a lot of our listeners, I mean, if you guys aren't feeling the energy coming out of this conversation, then you need to turn the volume up.
I know the first segment, we should have switched segments.
Oh, I know. We could still do that.
Yeah.
Well, we're just about out of time. So I guess I really want to end this on let's think about the listener. Let's think about the women that they're no doubt they're inspired by listening to you. It You have so much energy and you bring so much to the table, and we covered some really important topics. You can start small. You don't have to go full enchilada. Even if that means starting with 2 pigs and going to 8, but who's counting? You're doing this as a team with your husband, and I think that's a really important and valuable thing that I think a lot of women should be hearing. What else do you want to say directly to them before we end?
So if you have a desire to do any of this sort of thing, homesteading, farming, I mean, even just learning some of the skills that people have lost over the years, over the generations, get started. You don't have to wait until you have all of the things and the land to get moving on it. Maybe you start by um pairing up with a couple of local homesteaders and just helping them and watching what they do and learning that way. Or maybe you take some canning classes, and you don't necessarily have a big garden, but maybe you go to your local farm stand and you buy some food and you learn how to can that way to just kind of help you feel more self-sufficient. Or even just finding a local farmer and really understanding how they're processing their own meat and being involved in that, or purchasing from them. So I think oftentimes we beat ourselves up if we're like feeling like we're not able to do it, or it's just too overwhelming. But start small.
Yeah.
Start small, and it's a compound effect. These little things that you do, these little things that you learn. Like I said, we're big YouTubers. We've learned so much about animals and just understanding different things that work on other people's farms and implementing those things just from watching YouTube and just kind of throwing ourselves into it and learning.
Yeah. I am planning on putting together a resource for our listeners. So, any of those YouTube channels that you
Mm,
find valuable, share those with me, and I'll make sure to share them with our listeners.
awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. Again, guys, Nikki Seavey with Blueberry Ridge Ranch. You can find her website, blueberryridgeranchnh.com. I highly encourage you find her on social media. I mean, it is very inspiring to see what you've been doing. You're a very inspiring woman, and I thank you so much for being a part of the show.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Erin. Appreciate it.
All right, bye bye.
Bye, guys.